He drove steady to the thistle-bound town. He drove steady. He drove, but allowed him a pause before the display window of the last women's wear shop in town. It stood dark. He had passed it by 100 times and often felt compelled to gaze at the now forlorn and semi-clothed mannequin. The afternoon sun off the sidewalk gave her face a pale glow. Today the light even touched her saddened limbs, and he saw that one arm was nearly coming away from the hole. There seemed significance in the assemblage, but he didn't know what it was. Striding away, he knew this was something he would not likely return to see. He drove because such relative ease it was to drive deserted rocky highway, blessed vibration from stones through tire rubber, up tie rods and steer column to vertebra, to scapulae, along metacarpal to distal phalanx and skull, a balm his truck had always given him. That breed of power plant is efficient and finely compromised piece of pragmatic engineering designed to afford you maximum freedom of movement and employability. It fills a need integral to human progress, particular to this continent. It'll move a sizable general cargo. It'll run on the most basic gasoline. It has a heater to keep you warm and ventilation enough to let wind swirl from the windows to keep you cool. Ditches and sloughs either side accommodate flights of every duck and migratory bird to launch into infinite fetches up and out to oblivion aside your continued western lamb. He drove steady because the thought of just picking up and driving out in your own personal vehicle for parts unknown, no particular schedule, fate dictating every single day. Even for a little while, it would suit one man or another at some part of his life. But just remember stuff, kid. Hang on to the things you see and the people you meet and the times you have. There'll be dark days, but there's always going to be light, too. By the looks of what you've done so far, you might always have an interesting life. You're the envy of every decent man. Because there's no reason for a reasonable man to live out here. Sure, the crops come in when you plant them, mostly, and the weather might let you bring in a profit 2 years out of 3 normally, but you know yourself. The dust will choke the breath out of you. The winter is long enough to make you forget there's any other season. Any place on the planet that requires a man to string a line from his front door to the outhouse so as when you gotta go, you don't get lost in a blizzard. Or the pitch black night where you can't see your feet on the ground isn't fit for human habitation. He drove steady, but the truck bottomed on a particular high point of jagged boulder, and a sound came up that was out of place. The blackness of a 40-weight fluid pool widened under the front end. Not disposed toward profanity, he struggled now to continue at least a despairing cuff of the forehead or a fruitless throwdown of his hat. Even before grabbing the toolbox or fixing the jack or plotting any kind of plan, he sat upon the running board and let grief convene a 5-minute summit in his heart. Pure regret of an unknown and surprising intensity demotorized him in a way he'd never experienced and had him head in hands near sobbing in the afternoon sun, alone on a roadway so far gone and unused, it felt like he was the last boy on earth. He drove steady to a raging forest fire, where occasional moments of relief came when passing the hose companies who would immediately train their misting nozzles at the machine and the men upon it. As they moved mid-hill, the heat was of a type that at once paradoxically improved air quality, but raised the surface temperature of the metal they depended upon, to points impossible to touch even with heavy glove protection. He wondered at what stage he would lose his grip on calm and leap running from the fire. At the worst moment, the two crew huddled in the lee of the driver, away from the fireside as he furiously drove the carving blade into the earth and downward toward a lakeside that mercifully now could briefly be seen through the live treetops and ghosting flame. He drove steady, restarting the truck, and pulled a right turn toward where he'd once been set loose to run and play on beaches. The morning air was nearly too chill, so he cranked the window up to just an inch or so to let the new air swirl about. He drove steady and then strode solitary into the dead vehicle assemblage, and right away received a sensation of being the privileged entrant to some kind of multi-era majestic mechanized museum. Mottled cars and trucks of every rusting character were on paint-peeled display. A whole history of the world he scarcely knew was galleried in the vast random alloy amalgam. He observed the phases of decrepitude and the curious variations, how surface greenery clambered up and into some vehicles and others not. Wafting scents of earth-melded oil, haphazard features of glass. And everywhere, the suggestion of painful mortality was leavened by yawning invitations to be fascinated. Thank you.